The digital clock on the bedside table read 2:14 a.m. The numbers glowed a faint, ominous red in the darkness of our bedroom. Fairfax, Virginia, was usually silent at this hour, a heavy, suffocating silence that settled over the suburbs like a thick blanket. But tonight, something was different. I did not wake up from a nightmare. I woke up because of a sound. It was a soft click, the distinct sound of a door latch engaging, followed by the faint hiss of water running through pipes behind the wall. My first instinct was to reach out. My hand slid across the cool, high-thread count sheets to my left. Empty. Chris was not there. The indentation of his head on the pillow was still warm, but the space beside me was vacant. "Chris?" I whispered. My voice was raspy, dry, from the recycled air of the air conditioner. No answer. I sat up, my body protesting. It had been 3 months since I gave birth to Bella, but the ache in my lower back and the stiffness in my hips still lingered, a constant reminder of the trauma my body had endured. I rubbed my eyes, trying to focus. A sliver of yellow light sliced across the dark carpet, spilling out from under the bathroom door. The master bathroom. Our bathroom. The house we lived in was a spacious 2-story colonial. My in-laws, when they visited, stayed in the guest suite downstairs. Emily, the nanny my mother-in-law had so graciously hired for us, occupied the small service room near the kitchen on the first floor. The second floor was supposed to be our sanctuary, just Chris, me, and the nursery down the hall. So, who was in my bathroom at 2 in the morning? I pushed the duvet cover aside and swung my legs over the edge of the bed. The floor was cold beneath my bare feet. I walked slowly, not wanting to make a sound, though I wasn't sure why I felt the need to be stealthy in my own home. Perhaps it was a woman's intuition, that primal alarm bell that rings long before the brain processes the danger. I reached the bathroom door. The water had stopped running. Now there was only silence. I didn't knock. I turned the handle and pushed the door open. The sudden brightness of the vanity light stung my eyes. I blinked, shielding my face with one hand, and when my vision cleared, the air left my lungs. It wasn't Chris. Standing in front of the large mirror, illuminated by the harsh, unforgiving light, was Emily. She froze. Her hand was midair, reaching for a bottle of my expensive face serum. But that wasn't what made my stomach churn. It was what she was wearing, or rather, what she wasn't wearing. Emily stood there in nothing but a pair of lace panties. They were black, sheer, and definitely not the kind of practical underwear one wears to sleep. Her skin was flawless, glowing with youth and health, a stark contrast to my own pale, stretch-marked abdomen hidden beneath my oversized pajamas. Her breasts were exposed, firm and high. She looked like a statue of a goddess carved from marble, misplaced in my suburban bathroom. For a heartbeat, neither of us moved. The humidity in the room was thick, smelling of my lavender body wash. "Emily?" The name felt foreign on my tongue. She jumped, her eyes widening in mock terror. She quickly crossed her arms over her chest, a gesture that felt more performative than modest. "Oh my God, Mrs. Dalton!" Her voice was breathless, high-pitched. I am so sorry." I stood in the doorway, my hand gripping the frame so hard my knuckles turned white. "What are you doing here? Why are you in my bathroom?" She took a step back, her back pressing against the marble counter. She looked down, biting her lower lip. I needed a tampon. I started my period suddenly and I didn't have any downstairs. I didn't want to wake you up to ask, so I thought I could sneak in and borrow one." I stared at her. A tampon. I looked at her barely there panties. There was no sign of no urgency in her movement. And if she needed a tampon, why was she standing in front of the mirror, reaching for my serum? Why was she naked from the waist up? "The guest bathroom downstairs has supplies," I said, my voice deceptively calm. "My mother-in-law keeps a full stock there." I forgot. I panicked," she stammered. She grabbed a towel from the rack and draped it over herself, covering her body. "I am really sorry, Mrs. Dalton. Please don't be mad." She didn't wait for my dismissal. She tried to squeeze past me to get to the door. As she moved, her arm brushed against mine. Her skin was hot. She smelled of sweat and something else, something musky, like a man's cologne. My husband's cologne. I stepped aside, letting her pass. She practically ran out of the bedroom, her bare feet thudding softly on the carpet until she disappeared into the hallway, heading for the stairs. I stood alone in the bathroom. I looked at the mirror where she had just been standing. Well, I looked at my reflection, tired eyes, messy hair, a body that was still healing. I felt a surge of nausea. I turned off the light and went back into the bedroom. Chris was in bed. He was lying on his side, facing away from the door, his breathing deep and rhythmic. "Chris," I said into the dark. He didn't move. The rhythm of his breathing didn't change. I walked around to his side of the bed. I leaned down close to his face. His eyes were squeezed shut, just a little too tight to be natural. There was a sheen of sweat on his forehead. He was pretending. I felt a coldness spread through my chest, starting from my heart and reaching down to my toes. It wasn't the cold of the air conditioner anymore. It was the chill of realization. I didn't shake him. I didn't scream. I simply walked back to my side of the bed, climbed in, and pulled the duvet up to my chin. I stared at the ceiling, listening to the fake breathing of the man I had married 3 years ago. The house was silent again, but the safety was gone. The intrusion had happened, and I knew with a terrifying certainty that the door I had opened tonight could never be closed again. The next morning, the kitchen was bright and smelled of brewing coffee and frying bacon. Sunlight streamed through the large bay windows, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. It was a picture-perfect scene of domestic bliss. My mother-in-law, Mrs. Eleanor Dalton, was already up. She was sitting at the head of the table, sipping her herbal tea, her posture rigid as always. She was a woman who wore her traditional values like armor, always talking about family honor and legacy, yet her eyes were sharp, calculating, missing nothing. Emily was at the stove, fully dressed now in a modest gray t-shirt and jeans. She was humming softly as she flipped pancakes. Chris sat opposite his mother, scrolling through his phone, looking for all the world like a man who had slept soundly through the night. I walked in, carrying Bella in my arms. The baby was cooing, oblivious to the tension that tightened my throat. "Good morning, Amelia," Eleanor said, not looking up from her iPad. "You look tired. Did the baby keep you up?" I placed Bella in her high chair and sat down. Emily immediately brought over a plate of pancakes and placed it in front of me with a bright, innocent smile. "Morning, Mrs. Dalton," Emily chirped. I looked at her, really looked at her. There was no trace of the naked, flustered woman from 6 hours ago. She looked fresh, helpful, the perfect nanny. "I didn't sleep well," I said, my voice steady. I looked at Chris. He didn't look up. "Why?" Eleanor asked, finally glancing at me. "I found Emily in our bathroom at 2 a.m., I said. The humming at the stove stopped. The tapping of Chris's finger on his phone screen paused for a fraction of a second. "She was almost naked," I continued, keeping my tone conversational. "She said she needed a tampon." Eleanor frowned, placing her teacup down with a deliberate clink. She looked at Emily, then back at me. "Is that true, Emily?" "Yes, ma'am," Emily said, her voice trembling slightly. She turned around, clutching the spatula like a shield. "I told Mrs. Dalton I was sorry. It was an emergency. I didn't mean to intrude." "See?" Eleanor sighed, waving a hand dismissively. "The poor girl had a female emergency. Amelia, you know how confusing this big house can be." "She probably just panicked." I stared at my mother-in-law. "She was naked, Mother, in my private bathroom, where Chris was sleeping 10 feet away." "Oh, for heaven's sake," Chris spoke up, finally looking at me. His expression was one of mild annoyance, as if I were complaining about the weather. "Amelia, don't make a scene." She apologized. "She's young. Have some sympathy." "Sympathy?" I repeated. "Chris, you were there. You must have heard her." "I was asleep," Chris lied. He looked me straight in the eye, his face a mask of innocent confusion. "I didn't hear anything until you came back to bed, tossing and turning." I looked from Chris to Eleanor to Emily. Eleanor took a sip of tea. "Amelia, you are still hormonal. Postpartum depression can make you paranoid. Don't let your imagination ruin the atmosphere. Emily is a great help to us. Let it go." "Yeah, honey," Chris added, reaching across the table to pat my hand. His palm was damp. "Don't be so hard on her. It's just a misunderstanding." A misunderstanding. I pulled my hand away. I looked at Emily. She was biting her lip again, trying to look contrite, but there was a flicker in her eyes, a tiny spark of triumph. And then I looked at Eleanor. She wasn't looking at me. She was looking at Emily, and there was a subtle nod. Acknowledgement. My heart hammered against my ribs. This wasn't just a wandering husband and a seductive nanny. Eleanor knew. Eleanor wasn't surprised because she had probably approved it, or at least she was permitting it. I felt a wave of dizziness. I was surrounded. In my own kitchen, in the house I had helped choose, I was the outsider. Fine, I said softly. Maybe I am just tired. I picked up my fork and cut into the pancake. It tasted like ash in my mouth. Days turned into weeks. The house grew quieter, but the tension grew louder. I stopped trusting the shadows. I stopped trusting the silence. I began to observe. I became a ghost in my own home, watching, listening, waiting. It rained heavily on a Tuesday night, 3 weeks after the bathroom incident. The thunder rattled the window panes, flashes of lightning illuminating the room in stark, violent bursts. I had moved Bella's crib into our room, claiming she was fussy, but in reality I couldn't bear to leave her downstairs with Emily. Chris was in the shower. I was sitting in the armchair by the window, nursing the baby. The door to the bedroom opened. It wasn't Chris coming out of the bathroom. It was Emily entering from the hallway. She didn't see me in the shadowed corner. She wore a thin white nightgown that clung to her damp skin. The hallway light behind her turned the fabric translucent. She wasn't wearing anything underneath. She walked boldly into the room, her eyes scanning the bed. When she saw it was empty, she frowned. Then she turned toward the bathroom door where the sound of the shower was audible. "Chris?" she whispered. "Not Mr. Dalton, just Chris." "Emily?" I said. She spun around, nearly tripping over her own feet. "Oh," she gasped, clutching her chest. "Mrs. Dalton, I didn't see you." "Clearly," I said. I didn't stand up. I kept rocking the baby, my movements slow and rhythmic. "What do you need?" I, I was worried about the baby," she said quickly. "The thunder is so loud. I thought she might be scared." "The baby is with me," I said. "She is fine." "Okay, good. That's good." She backed away toward the door. I care about her a lot." "Get out," I said. She fled. A moment later, the bathroom door opened, and Chris walked out, a towel wrapped around his waist. He looked flushed. He looked at the empty doorway where Emily had just been, then at me. "Who were you talking to?" he asked. "Nobody," I said. "Just the wind." He looked at me, suspicion narrowing his eyes, but he didn't push it. He went to the window and looked out at the storm. I saw the hunger in his eyes. He wasn't looking at the rain. He was thinking about what was waiting for him downstairs. I looked down at my daughter, sleeping peacefully in my arms. "I will protect you," I promised silently. "No matter what I have to do." The Mid-Autumn Festival arrived, bringing with it the crisp air of autumn and the arrival of Andrew Dalton, my father-in-law. Andrew was a successful architect, a man who spent his life building skyscrapers in Seattle, while his wife managed the family empire in Virginia. He was charismatic, silver-haired, and carried an air of authority that demanded respect. He arrived in a black Lincoln, bringing gifts and noise into the silent house. "Where is my granddaughter?" he boomed as he entered, opening his arms wide. I walked down the stairs, holding Bella. "Welcome home, Dad." He hugged us both, smelling of expensive scotch and cigars. "Amelia, you look thin. Is Eleanor feeding you enough?" "I'm fine, Dad," I smiled. "And who is this?" Andrew asked, his eyes drifting past me to the kitchen doorway. Emily stood there. She had dressed up today, a floral dress that fit tight around the waist, accentuating her curves. Her hair was loose, cascading down her shoulders. "This is Emily," Chris said, stepping forward quickly. "The nanny Mom hired." "Ah," Andrew said. He looked Emily up and down. It wasn't a lecherous look, not exactly. It was an appraisal, like a man looking at a well-designed building. "Very good, very good." "Hello, Mr. Dalton," Emily said, dipping her head shyly. "I've heard so much about you." "Good things, I hope?" Andrew chuckled. "Only the best," she smiled, looking up through her eyelashes. That night, we had a family dinner. The table was full of food. Eleanor played the role of the matriarch perfectly. Chris played the dutiful son. Andrew played the benevolent patriarch, and Emily hovered serving wine, clearing plates, always present, always close. I watched them. I watched how Chris's eyes followed Emily's hands as she poured wine for his father. I watched how Eleanor watched Chris watching Emily. But then I saw something new. I saw Andrew watching Emily. It was subtle, a glance that lingered a second too long on her retreating figure, a smile that was a little too warm when she handed him his napkin. And I saw Emily notice it. I saw the slight shift in her posture when she was near him. She stood straighter. She brushed against his shoulder as she collected the plates. My stomach churned. This house was not a home. It was a pit of vipers. And I realized then that the rot went deeper than I thought. It wasn't just my husband. It was the father. And the mother was the conductor of this twisted orchestra. I excused myself early, claiming a headache. As I walked up the stairs, I looked back down. They were all laughing in the dining room. A happy family picture. But from the shadows of the second floor, they looked like monsters feasting on a carcass. And I knew with a cold, hard certainty that I was the carcass. But monsters often forget one thing: even the dead can release a poison that kills. The house in Fairfax had always felt large, but with Andrew Dalton's arrival, it felt cavernous, filled with echoes and secrets. My father-in-law was a man who commanded space. He filled a room with his voice, his scent of tobacco and pine, and his undeniable presence. But in the days following his arrival, I noticed a shift. The commanding architect, the man who built skyscrapers, began to shrink into the shadows of his own home. And the shadows were concentrated around the first-floor service room. It started subtly, a lingering hand on Emily's shoulder when she poured his coffee. A joke that lasted a little too long, his eyes crinkling with a mirth that didn't reach his mouth. Emily, for her part, seemed to shrink too. The confident, almost arrogant girl who had stood half-naked in my bathroom was now skittish, like a deer caught between two headlights. Chris noticed it too. I saw the way his jaw tightened when his father laughed with Emily. I saw the way he clenched his fists under the dinner table. It wasn't the anger of a protective husband. It was the jealousy of a rival. They were competing. My husband and his father were competing for the attention of the nanny, and I sat there, breastfeeding their heir, invisible in plain sight. 3 nights after Andrew arrived, the pattern established itself. I was awake, as usual. Insomnia had become my companion. The clock read 1:00 a.m. Chris was asleep beside me, or pretending to be, but the tension in his body was palpable. He was listening. We were both listening. From downstairs, the faint sound of a door opening drifted up through the vents. Then footsteps. Heavy, deliberate footsteps. Not the light patter of Emily. These belonged to a man. Chris shifted. He started to sit up, his breathing shallow. I reached out and placed a hand on his chest. Where are you going? He froze. I need water. There is a bottle on the nightstand, I said, my voice cutting through the darkness. He hesitated, then lay back down, frustration radiating off him in waves. He couldn't go down. Not with me watching. Not with his father down there. I'll go check, I said suddenly. No! Chris grabbed my wrist. His grip was too tight. Don't. It's probably just the pipes or Dad. Let him be. If it's Dad, he might need help, I said, pulling my hand free. He's old, Chris. What if he slipped? I didn't wait for an answer. I slipped out of bed, put on my robe, and walked out of the room. The hallway was dark. I moved silently down the stairs, guided by the moonlight filtering through the foyer windows. The light in the downstairs bathroom was on. The door was slightly ajar. I approached it slowly. I could hear sounds, low voices, a muffled and the distinct wet sound of skin against skin. I stood outside the door, my heart pounding in my throat, not from fear, but from a sickening confirmation. I raised my hand and knocked, hard. 3 sharp raps. Dad, is everything okay? The silence that followed was instant and deafening. A crash. Something fell, a bottle maybe. Then the sound of a toilet flushing, frantic and loud. The door swung open. Andrew stood there. He was wearing his silk pajama bottoms and a white undershirt. He was holding a baseball bat in one hand, his face flushed red, sweat beading on his forehead. Amelia, he boomed, though his voice wavered slightly. You scared the life out of me. I looked past him. The bathroom was empty, but the shower curtain was pulled shut. I saw the silhouette of someone standing in the tub, trembling. I heard noises, Dad, I said, keeping my face blank. I thought someone broke in. A rat, Andrew said quickly, too quickly. He gestured with the bat. Saw a damn rat run in here. Big one. I was trying to catch the bastard. A rat? I repeated. With a baseball bat? In the guest bathroom. Nasty creatures, he said, wiping his brow. Didn't want to wake the house. I think I scared it off. From behind the shower curtain, a soft, stifled whimper escaped. Andrew flinched. He coughed loudly to cover the sound. Must be the pipes. Old house, you know, noises everywhere. I looked him in the eye. I saw the panic there. I saw the shame, buried deep under layers of entitlement. Right, I said. Well, if the rat is gone, you should go to bed, Dad. You look exhausted. Yes, I will. He stepped out, blocking my view of the shower curtain. Go on up, Amelia. I'll lock up. I turned and walked away. I didn't look back. But as I climbed the stairs, I heard the bathroom door click shut again. When I returned to the bedroom, Chris was sitting up. What was it? He asked, his voice tight. A rat, I said, climbing into bed. A rat? Your father was chasing a rat with a baseball bat. Chris let out a breath that sounded like a laugh, but there was no humor in it. He knew. He knew exactly what kind of rat his father was chasing, and he did nothing. The next morning, the atmosphere in the kitchen was brittle. Emily looked terrible. Her eyes were puffy, red-rimmed. She moved slowly, wincing as she bent down to retrieve a pan from the lower cabinet. She didn't look at anyone. Andrew was jovial, too loud, eating his eggs with gusto. Chris sat in sullen silence, pushing his food around his plate. But the real revelation came later that day. My mother-in-law, Eleanor, called via FaceTime from Kansas. She wanted to see the baby. I propped the iPad up on the kitchen counter while I prepared a bottle. How is everyone? Eleanor asked. Her image was crisp, her background the orderly, sterile living room of her farmhouse. Fine, I said. Dad is enjoying his stay. I bet he is, she said. Her voice was dry. Then she leaned closer to the camera. Has he been sleeping well? I noticed he was up late last night. I paused, the bottle of milk hovering in my hand. How do you know he was up late? Eleanor didn't blink. Oh, he told me. He called me this morning. That was a lie. I had been in the kitchen all morning. Andrew hadn't called anyone. He said he had a stomach ache, Eleanor continued, her eyes boring into mine through the screen. Around 1 a.m. Said he was in the downstairs bathroom for a long time. A chill ran down my spine. It wasn't just intuition anymore. It was certainty. Eleanor, I said slowly, do you have cameras in the house? She smiled. It was a thin, tight smile. Amelia, dear, given my health, the fainting spells, we installed monitors in the main areas in the guest suite years ago. Just for safety, in case I fall when I'm alone. Safety. She had a camera in the guest bedroom. Probably in the hallway, maybe even in the living room. She knew. She knew about Chris and Emily. She knew about Andrew and Emily. She had watched her husband enter the bathroom at 1 a.m. She had watched her son pretending to sleep upstairs while his father used the nanny. She watched it all, like a reality TV show. Did you see the rat? I asked, testing her. The rat? Her eyebrows raised slightly. Dad said he was chasing a rat. Ah, Eleanor said. Her expression didn't change. Yes, Andrew always did hate pests. Tell him to be careful. He's not as young as he thinks he is. She wasn't talking about rodents. I looked at the screen, at this woman who sat hundreds of miles away pulling the strings of this grotesque puppet show. She allowed it. She permitted the nanny to serve as her son and now her husband. Why? Power. As long as they were guilty, as long as they were dirty, she held the moral high ground. She held the evidence. She owned them. And Emily? Emily was just a disposable commodity, a perk of the job. I'll tell him, I said softly. The day of the Mid-Autumn Festival arrived. The air was thick with humidity and unspoken accusations. We sat on the patio. The moon was full and bright, casting long, distorted shadows across the lawn. We ate mooncakes, dense, sweet, suffocating. Andrew sat in the wicker chair, swirling his scotch. Chris sat on the steps, his back to us. "Emily," Andrew called out, "bring more ice." Emily appeared from the kitchen. She wore a simple white dress. She looked like a ghost. She carried the ice bucket to Andrew. As she leaned down to place ice in his glass, Andrew's hand lingered on her wrist. He whispered something to her. She flinched, her eyes darting to me, then to Chris. Chris saw it. He stood up abruptly, his chair scraping loudly against the concrete. "I'm going to bed," Chris announced, his voice shaking with suppressed rage. "Sit down, son," Andrew said calmly. He didn't let go of Emily's wrist. "The night is young. Celebrate with your old man." Chris stood there, fists clenched. He looked at his father. He looked at the woman he had slept with, now held by his father. He was weak. He was so incredibly weak. "I'm tired," Chris muttered. He turned and walked into the house, leaving Emily behind. Emily looked at me. Her eyes were pleading. "Help me." I took a sip of my tea. It was cold. "I think I'll go up too," I said pleasantly. "Good night, Dad. Good night, Emily." I stood up and walked past them. I heard Emily's breath hitch. I heard the clink of ice in the glass. I went upstairs to the nursery, picked up my daughter, and held her tight. Downstairs, the silence stretched, heavy and pregnant with sin. 2 days after the festival, Emily left. She didn't say goodbye. I came down in the morning, and her room was empty. The bed was stripped. The closet was bare. Chris was pacing the living room, looking like a junkie going through withdrawal. He was pale, sweating, constantly checking his phone. Andrew sat on the sofa reading the newspaper, but he hadn't turned a page in 20 minutes. He looked older, deflated, like a balloon that had lost its air. "Where is she?" Chris asked, his voice cracking. "She quit," Andrew said gruffly. "Said family emergency, left before dawn." "She wouldn't just leave," Chris muttered. "She wouldn't." I stood in the doorway holding a basket of laundry. "Maybe she got tired," I said. Both men looked at me. "Tired of what?" Andrew snapped. "Of the work," I said simply. "It's a demanding, taking care of everything." They fell silent. The house settled into a new kind of quiet. It wasn't peaceful, it was the quiet of a tomb. The toy was gone. The distraction had vanished. Now, they were left with themselves and with me. Chris became sullen and distant. He stopped coming home early. Andrew announced he was returning to Seattle earlier than planned. The game was over, and they were bored. But I knew it wasn't over. I knew Eleanor. I knew she wouldn't let an asset like Emily just disappear. And I knew that in this family, nothing was ever free. 3 months passed. The winter winds began to strip the trees bare. I focused on Bella. I focused on my health. I started running again, strengthening my body, sharpening my mind. I was waiting. Then the call came. Eleanor was coming to visit, and she wasn't coming alone. She was bringing news. I stood by the window, watching her car pull into the driveway. The sky was gray, promising snow. Chris stood behind me. "Mom sounds serious," he said nervously. "She always is," I replied. The car door opened. Eleanor stepped out. She looked at the house, then up at the window where I stood. Even from this distance, I could feel her gaze. It was the gaze of a judge arriving to deliver a sentence. I turned to Chris. "Get ready, honey. The bill is coming due." He frowned. "What are you talking about?" "You'll see," I said. I smoothed my shirt, checked my reflection in the mirror, calm, composed, unbreaking, and walked down to open the door. The fire that had been smoldering in the basement was about to burn the whole house down. Eleanor Dalton did not waste time with pleasantries. She sat in the center of the living room sofa, her coat still on, her leather handbag resting on her lap like a judge's gavel. Chris sat opposite her, his knees bouncing nervously. I sat in the armchair, my hands folded calmly in my lap, though my heart was beating a slow, heavy rhythm against my ribs. "Emily is pregnant," Eleanor announced. The words hung in the air, sucking the oxygen out of the room. Chris stopped bouncing his leg. He looked down at the carpet, his face flushing a deep, shameful crimson. He didn't look surprised. He looked caught. "She is 4 months along," Eleanor continued, her voice devoid of emotion, as if she were reading a stock market report. "It is a boy." A boy. The word struck me harder than the infidelity itself. A boy. The one thing I had failed to give them. The one thing the Dalton dynasty craved more than money. She sent me the ultrasound results yesterday, Eleanor said. She pulled a folded piece of paper from her bag and placed it on the coffee table. The black and white grain of a fetal image stared up at us. The DNA test confirms it. It is Christopher's. I looked at Chris. He still wouldn't meet my eyes. Pour shame? I asked, my voice steady. What do you expect me to do? Congratulate him? Eleanor turned her cold gaze toward me. We have a solution. A proposal. I'm listening. The Dalton family cannot have an illegitimate child floating around, especially a male heir, Eleanor stated. We will not abandon our blood. She leaned forward. Emily has agreed to a settlement. We will pay her $10,000. She will carry the baby to term. Once the child is born, she will sign over full custody to us and disappear. She will move back to the Midwest and start over. I felt a bitter laugh bubbling in my throat. And the baby? The baby will be raised here, Eleanor said, by you and Chris. I stared at her. You want me to raise his mistress's child? The child conceived in my house while I was recovering from giving birth to your granddaughter? To the outside world, Eleanor said, ignoring my outrage. The child will be yours. You will announce a second pregnancy. We will arrange for you to wear a prosthetic bump when you go out. Or you will go to a private clinic for the birth. It happens all the time in our circles, Amelia. It is clean. And if I refuse? Eleanor sat back. Her eyes hardened. Then you leave, she said simply. You divorce Chris. But make no mistake, Amelia. You signed a prenuptial agreement. You have no job. You have no assets. We have the best lawyers in Virginia. If you leave it with nothing. And we will fight for full custody of Bella. Do you think a judge will give a child to an unemployed, emotionally unstable mother over a wealthy, established family? It was a threat, a naked, brutal threat. You can't take Bella, I whispered. Try me, Eleanor said. The silence that followed was suffocating. Think about it, Eleanor said, standing up. It is a win-win. You keep your lifestyle, you keep your daughter, you get a son without the pain of labor, which, as we know, your body can't handle anymore. You maintain your status as Mrs. Dalton. She walked to the guest room. I'll give you until tomorrow morning. I was left alone with Chris. He finally looked up. His eyes were wet. He reached out to grab my hand, but I pulled it away. Amelia, he pleaded, please. Please what? I hissed. Please raise your bastard? It was a mistake, he cried. I was weak. She seduced me, but it's a boy, Amelia, a son. You know how much Dad wants a grandson. This fixes everything. Fixes everything? I stood up, trembling with rage. It fixes your ego. It destroys my dignity. I love you, he said. The words sounded like vomit. I still love you. We can get through this. Just accept it. For the family. For Bella. She needs a brother. I looked at him. I looked at the man I had vowed to spend my life with. He was pathetic. He was a coward who hid behind his mother's money and his father's expectations. You are disgusting, I said. I walked out of the room. I went to the nursery and locked the door. I spent the night sitting on the floor next to Bella's crib. I didn't sleep. I thought about my options. If I divorced him now, Eleanor was right. They would destroy me in court. They would drag out the proceedings until I was bankrupt. They would paint me as crazy. I would lose Bella. I looked at my daughter's sleeping face. I couldn't let that happen. But I also couldn't stay and be their doormat. I couldn't be the silent victim they expected me to be. If they wanted to make a transaction, a child for a lifestyle, then I would treat it like a business deal. I needed leverage. I needed security. By dawn, my tears had dried. My plan was formed. The next morning, breakfast was a funeral. Eleanor was eating toast. Chris was drinking black coffee, his eyes darting between us. I walked in. I was dressed in a sharp black suit, my hair pulled back in a tight bun. I placed a folder on the table. I have made my decision, I said. Eleanor put down her toast. And? I will do it, I said. I will accept the child. I will raise him as my own. I will play the happy mother. Chris let out a massive sigh of relief. Oh, thank God, Amelia, thank you. You won't regret this. However, I interrupted, raising a hand, I have conditions. Eleanor narrowed her eyes. Conditions? You treat this like a business arrangement, I said. So will I. You are asking me to swallow a humiliation that no woman should bear. You are asking me to clean up your son's mess. That service comes with a price. What do you want? Eleanor asked warily. Security, I said. If I am to raise this child, I need to know that my future and Bella's future is secure. I want this house transferred to my name. Sole ownership. Chris choked on his coffee. The house, Amelia, that's $1 million property. And your son is priceless, isn't he? I countered. I also want the Tesla, and I want a cash transfer of $500,000 into a private account in my name. You are out of your mind. Eleanor slammed her hand on the table. That is extortion. No, I said calmly. Extortion is threatening to take a mother's child away if she doesn't comply. This is compensation for emotional damages. This is the price of my silence. I leaned forward, looking Eleanor dead in the eye. Think about it, Eleanor. If I leave, the scandal will destroy Chris's reputation. It will humiliate Andrew. Everyone in Fairfax will know the Daltons are raising a nanny's bastard. Is your reputation worth less than a house? Eleanor's face turned purple. She opened her mouth to scream, but Chris grabbed her arm. Mom, he whispered urgently. Mom, come into the kitchen. They went into the kitchen. They didn't close the door fully. I sat at the table pouring myself a cup of tea and listened. She's greedy, Eleanor hissed. She's taking advantage of us. Just give it to her, Chris whispered back. Mom, please. I can't lose this son. And think about it. She's my wife. If the house is in her name, it's still in the family. We just need her to sign the agreement to accept the child. Once the baby is here, we can handle her. What do you mean? I mean we can get her to sign it back later, Chris said, his voice low and cunning. Or before, we find a way to prove she's unfit later. But right now, we need her cooperation. Just sign it. It's just paper. They thought I was stupid. They thought I was a desperate housewife grasping for material things to soothe a broken heart. They thought that once the baby was born, I would be trapped again, too busy with 2 children to fight. They had no idea. They came back out. Eleanor's face was composed again, though her eyes were cold as ice. Fine, she said. We agree. Good, I said. I want it done today. My lawyer will draft the transfer deeds. We signed before noon. By 11:30 a.m., we were at the notary's office downtown. The atmosphere was sterile. The notary, a balding man named Mr. Henderson, looked confused by the tension in the room, but asked no questions. Chris signed the deed transfer for the house. His hand shook slightly. Eleanor signed the check for the funds. I signed the agreement to adopt the unnamed child. As the final stamp hit the paper, thud, I felt a shift in the universe. The house was mine. The car was mine. The money was mine. Chris looked at me with a relieved smile. He reached out to hug me. Thank you, honey. We're going to be a happy family. You'll see. This is a fresh start. Yes, I said, letting him hug me. I didn't hug back. A fresh start. I looked over his shoulder at Eleanor. She was watching me with a look of smug victory. She thought she had bought a broodmare. She thought she had secured her legacy. I smiled at her. It was a soft, gentle smile, the kind of smile a predator gives before the kill. They thought the transaction was over. They didn't know I had recorded the entire conversation in the kitchen. They didn't know I had copies of the emails Eleanor sent about the surrogacy arrangement. They didn't know that by transferring the assets, they had just handed me the weapon to execute them. We walked out of the office into the crisp autumn air. The wind whipped around us, scattering dry leaves across the pavement. Let's go home, Chris said, opening the car door for me. Yes, I said. Let's go home. My home. The intrusion was over. The enemy was inside the gates, but they had made a fatal error. They forgot that I held the keys now. The fire was lit, and I was about to watch them burn. The ink on the property deed was barely dry when the celebration began. It was a grotesque affair. We were back in the living room of my house, though they didn't know it was truly mine yet, and Eleanor had popped open a bottle of vintage Dom Perignon. "To the future," Eleanor declared, raising her crystal flute. Her eyes sparkled with the triumph of a general who had just won a bloodless war. "To the Dalton legacy." Chris clinked his glass against hers, his face flushed with relief and champagne. "To family." They looked at me, expecting me to join in. I held my glass by the stem, the cold condensation seeping into my fingertips. I forced the corners of my mouth upward. It felt like the skin was cracking. "To family," I echoed. I took a sip. The expensive wine tasted like vinegar. "Now," Eleanor said, setting her glass down on a coaster. She reached into a large shopping bag she had brought with her. "We need to start the narrative immediately. People talk. We need to control the story before the baby arrives." She pulled out an object wrapped in tissue paper. It was a silicone belly, a prosthetic pregnancy bump, designed to mimic a woman in her 4th or 5th month. My stomach lurched. "Put this on," Eleanor commanded. She wasn't asking. "We need to take a photo, just a casual one. Excited for baby number 2. I'll post it on the family Facebook group. That will stop any rumors before they start." I stared at the flesh-colored mound of silicone. "Eleanor, I just signed the papers today. Can't we wait?" "Delay breeds suspicion," she snapped. "Put it on, Amelia. You agreed to the terms." I looked at Chris. He was avoiding my gaze, pretending to be fascinated by the bubbles in his glass. He was letting his mother humiliate his wife because he was too cowardly to stop it. "Fine," I said. I stood up and lifted my shirt. I didn't go to the bathroom to change. I did it right there, in front of them. I wanted them to see. I wanted them to see the flat, scarred stomach of the woman who had nearly died birthing their granddaughter. I wanted to etch this moment into my memory so that when I destroyed them, I would feel no mercy. I strapped the fake belly around my waist. It was heavy. It felt like a tumor. "Perfect," Eleanor clapped her hands. "Chris, stand next to her. Put your hand on the bump. Look happy." Chris stood up and wrapped his arm around me. His hand rested on the cold silicone. He smiled for the camera. "Say legacy," Eleanor chirped. The camera flashed. In that blinding burst of light, something inside me finally died. The Amelia who wanted to be a good wife, the Amelia who sought approval, the Amelia who forgave. She was gone. In her place was something else entirely. Something cold. Something sharp. That night, Chris wanted to celebrate in the bedroom. He came out of the shower smelling of soap and entitlement. He approached the bed where I was reading, wearing that specific smile, the one that said, "We fixed the problem, now we can go back to normal." "It's been a long time," he murmured, reaching for my shoulder. "I've missed you, Amy." I didn't look up from my book. "I'm tired, Chris." "Come on," he coaxed, his hand sliding down my arm. "The stress is over. The house is yours. The baby is handled. We can just be us again." I closed the book with a sharp snap. I turned to look at him. "You have a pregnant mistress," I said. My voice was devoid of inflection. "You forced your wife to wear a fake belly today, and you think I'm in the mood?" He recoiled as if I had slapped him. I thought we moved past that this morning. You signed the papers. You forgave me." "I signed a business deal," I corrected him. "I didn't sign a pardon." "Amelia, don't be like this," he whined, the petulance creeping back into his voice. "I'm trying here. I gave you the house." "You gave me the house because you had no choice," I said. I turned off the bedside lamp, plunging the room into darkness. "Go to sleep, Chris. Don't touch me." He lay there in the dark, radiating frustration. I could hear his teeth grinding. He felt cheated. He had paid the price, but he wasn't getting the goods. Good. Let him starve. The next morning, I told Chris I had a therapy appointment. "Good idea," he said, looking at his phone. "You've been tense. It will help you adjust to the new situation." I didn't go to a therapist. I drove to downtown Arlington, to a glass and steel building that housed the law firm of Sterling and Vance. Arthur Sterling was not a nice man. He was known in Virginia legal circles as the Butcher. He didn't facilitate amicable divorces. He presided over demolitions. He sat behind his mahogany desk, reading the file I had prepared. The recording of the kitchen conversation, the emails from Eleanor, the property deed transfer, the signed surrogacy agreement. He read in silence for 10 minutes. Then he looked up. A slow, wolfish grin spread across his face. "Mrs. Dalton," he said, his voice a deep rumble. "This is exquisite." "Is it enough?" I asked. "Enough?" he laughed. "You have them in a chokehold. The property transfer is ironclad. It's a post-nuptial gift, very hard to contest. The agreement regarding the child proves intent to commit fraud against the state regarding birth registration. The recording proves coercion and duress." He leaned back, tenting his fingers. "We can file for divorce today. We can allege adultery, emotional abuse, and coercion. We can strip him of custody. We can probably get a restraining order against the mother." "Not yet," I said. Sterling raised an eyebrow. "Why wait? You have the gun. Pull the trigger." "I want the father," I said. Sterling paused. "Andrew Dalton, the architect?" "Yes, he's involved," I said. "He was sleeping with the nanny, too, before she got pregnant. Maybe even during." Sterling let out a low whistle. "Do you have proof?" "Not yet," I said, "but I know where it is." "If you can get proof of that," Sterling said, leaning forward, his eyes gleaming, "it's not just a divorce. It's the end of the Dalton name. Andrew sits on the ethics board of the National Institute of Architects. A scandal involving sexual misconduct with a subordinate, a domestic employee shared with his son, would bury him." "That's the goal," I said. "Get me the proof," Sterling said, "and then Mrs. Dalton, we will burn their world down." Returning to the house felt like walking back into a cage, but this time I held the key. The house was quiet. Chris was at work. Eleanor had returned to Kansas to manage things on that end, presumably to keep Emily hidden. I had the house to myself. I went straight to the guest suite on the first floor, the room Andrew and Eleanor used when they visited. Eleanor had mentioned cameras. She said they monitored the main areas in the guest suite. If she was telling the truth and Eleanor was too controlling to lie about surveillance, the footage had to be stored somewhere. I checked the closet. Nothing. I checked the drawers. Nothing. Then I remembered. Andrew was old-fashioned, but Eleanor was modern. She controlled everything from her iPad. But the local backup, it had to be physical. Eleanor didn't trust the cloud entirely. I went to the basement. In the utility room, tucked behind the internet router, was a small black box, a network-attached storage NAS drive. My heart raced. I pulled my laptop out of my bag and connected it to the drive via a LAN cable. Password required. I stared at the prompt. I tried Chris's birthday. Incorrect. I tried Bella's birthday. Incorrect. I tried Eleanor's wedding anniversary. Incorrect. I closed my eyes, trying to think like Eleanor. What did she value most? What was the core of her existence? Legacy. Dalton. I typed in Dalton Legacy 1980, the year the firm was founded. Access denied. I bit my lip. Think, Amelia. Think about the woman who forces her daughter-in-law to wear a fake belly. What gives her power, control? I tried. Control, too short. I sat back frustrated. Then I remembered something Chris had told me once, laughing about his mother. She never changes her passwords. She still uses the name of her first prize-winning horse. Thunder, I whispered. I typed, Thunder, access denied. I typed, Thunder 1, access denied. My hands were sweating. I had limited attempts before the system might lock me out or send an alert to Eleanor's phone. I took a deep breath. I looked around the basement. It was cold and damp. Then it hit me. The day she arrived, she made a comment about the Wi-Fi password. She said it should be something hard to guess, like the coordinates of the first building Andrew designed. She was obsessed with Andrew's achievements, even as she controlled him. I quickly searched on my phone. Andrew Dalton first major project. Result, the Helios Tower, Seattle. Coordinates, 47.6062 digs N 122.331 dear WW. It was a long shot, a crazy, desperate shot. I typed 476062 23321 processing. The screen blinked green. Access granted. I almost cried out. Of course, it was complex, numeric, and tied to the family glory. I opened the folder directories. 2024. September, guest bedroom. Night vision. There were dozens of files. I scrolled to the dates Andrew was here, the dates of the rat incident. I clicked on a file dated September 15th, 1:14 a.m. The video player opened. The footage was grainy, black and white night vision, but clear enough. The camera angle was from the corner of the ceiling, looking down at the bed. The bed was empty. I frowned. Then I saw movement at the bottom of the frame. The door to the bathroom was open. The camera caught a reflection in the bathroom mirror. It was Andrew and Emily. They weren't fighting a rat. Andrew was cornering her against the sink. She was pushing him away, her body language screaming discomfort. He grabbed her face. He said something. There was no audio, but the aggression was clear. She was crying. Then he kissed her, forcefully. She went limp. I felt bile rise in my throat. This wasn't just an affair. This was harassment. This was a powerful man preying on a vulnerable girl who depended on his family for her livelihood. And then I clicked on another file. September 17th. This one was in the bedroom itself. Andrew was sitting on the edge of the bed. Emily was kneeling on the floor, sobbing. I couldn't hear the words, but I saw Andrew hand her a stack of cash. He patted her head like one would pat a dog. Then he pointed to the door. It was a transaction. I copied everything, every single file, every timestamp. I disconnected the drive. I wiped my laptop's recent history. I sat in the cold basement, the hard drive burning a hole in my pocket. I had it. I had the nuclear code. Chris was an adulterer. Eleanor was a blackmailer. Andrew was a predator. And I was the executioner. That evening, Chris came home with flowers. For the mother of my son, he said, beaming. I took the flowers. They were lilies, funeral flowers. They're beautiful, I said. Mom called, Chris said, loosening his tie. She said the Facebook post already has 200 likes. Everyone is congratulating us. The Dalton name is stronger than ever. That's wonderful, I said. I walked to the kitchen to find a vase. Oh, by the way, Chris called out, my boss invited us to the company gala next week. He wants to congratulate us personally. It's a big deal, Amelia. All the partners will be there. Dad is flying in for it too. I stopped. The water from the faucet ran cold over my hands. The company gala, all the partners, Andrew Dalton. Next week? I asked. Yes, Saturday night. I turned off the water. I'll be there, I said. I wouldn't miss it for the world. A plan began to form in my mind, a plan so cold, so public, so devastating that it scared even me. Why file for divorce quietly in a lawyer's office when I could deliver the papers in front of the very people whose opinion they valued most? Perfect, Chris said, oblivious. Wear something nice, something that shows off the bump. I will, I promised. I'll wear something unforgettable. I looked at the calendar on the fridge. 7 days. 7 days to play the role. 7 days to sharpen the blade. The countdown had begun. The silicone bump weighed exactly 4 pounds. Eleanor had insisted on the premium model, the one with realistic weight distribution, to ensure my posture mimicked that of a pregnant woman. I strapped it on every morning like a soldier strapping on a bulletproof vest. The charade required props. It required costumes. And today it required a dress for the gala. Chris drove me to an upscale boutique in Tyson's Corner. He was humming along to the radio, tapping at his fingers on the steering wheel. He was in a good mood. Why wouldn't he be? His wife was compliant, his mistress was hidden, and his legacy was secure. This one will look great on you, Chris said, pulling a sapphire blue gown from the rack. It's loose around the waist, but elegant. Mom loves blue. It's beautiful, I said, forcing a smile. The sales assistant, a young woman with bright eyes and a genuine smile, bustled over. Oh, for the gala? And I see you're expecting. Congratulations. How far along are you? 5 months, Chris answered for me, beaming. It's a boy. A boy? How wonderful, the girl chirped. She looked at me. You're absolutely glowing, ma'am. Pregnancy suits you. I looked at myself in the three-way mirror. The dress draped over the silicone mound perfectly. My face was pale, my eyes shadowed despite the concealer. I didn't look like I was glowing. I looked like I was haunting my own body. "Thank you," I said softly. "Can I get you some water or a chair?" the girl asked, solicitous. "We don't want you on your feet too long." "I'm fine," I said. "Just ring it up." As Chris paid, using the credit card that was now linked to the account I legally owned, I felt a surge of nausea. It wasn't morning sickness. It was a sickness of the soul. I was lying to this innocent girl. I was lying to the world. But then I remembered the video footage on the hard drive hidden in the basement. I remembered Emily's face as Andrew cornered her. I wasn't lying. I was undercover. The preparation for the gala wasn't just about clothes. It was about paperwork. 2 days later, Eleanor sent instructions. I had to go to a specific clinic in Maryland for a checkup. Dr. Vance is an old friend of the family, Chris explained as he drove me there. He handled similar situations for Mom's friends. He's very discreet. The clinic was in a nondescript brick building. There were no children running in the waiting room, no parenting magazines. It was quiet, sterile, and smelled of bleach and money. Dr. Vance was a man in his 60s with cold reptilian eyes and hands that felt like dry parchment. He didn't ask me to undress. He didn't use a stethoscope. He sat at his desk, opened a file labeled Amelia Dalton, and began writing. "Blood pressure, 120/80, he muttered as he wrote. "Fetal heart rate, 140 beats per minute, strong. Weight gain consistent with the second trimester." He was fabricating medical records, creating a paper trail for a baby that didn't exist in my womb. "And the ultrasound?" Chris asked, sitting anxiously on the edge of the chair. "Here, Amelia." Dr. Vance slid a printout across the desk. It was a real ultrasound image, labeled with my name and today's date. From a donor file. It matches the timeline perfectly. I stared at the grainy black and white image. A stranger's baby. A ghost child. "Is everything legal?" Chris asked, his voice dropping to a whisper. Dr. Vance looked over his spectacles. "Mr. Dalton, legality is a matter of documentation. If the documents say you are pregnant, you are pregnant. When the child is born, I will sign the birth certificate myself. You have nothing to worry about." He turned to me. "You just need to play your part, Mrs. Dalton. Don't do anything strenuous. Don't let anyone touch the stomach. And for God's sake, don't take that thing off when there are guests." "I understand," I said. "Good." He closed the file. "That will be $5,000. Cash, as usual." Chris handed over a thick envelope. I watched the transaction. Money for lies. Money to rewrite biology. This was their world. A world where truth was just another commodity you could buy if your wallet was fat enough. I felt a cold rage harden in my chest. They thought they were buying my silence. They were actually funding their own destruction. I memorized the name of the clinic. I memorized Dr. Vance's face. He was going down with them. 3 days before the gala, Andrew arrived. He came alone this time, Eleanor staying back to monitor the asset, Emily. Andrew looked different. He was still imposing, still loud, but there was a jittery energy about him, and he drank more scotch than usual. He jumped when the phone rang. We sat down for dinner. I wore a loose sweater over the bump. "So," Andrew boomed, cutting into his steak, "you ready for the big night? The firm is expecting a show, Chris. We need to project stability." "We are ready, Dad," Chris said. "Amelia has the dress. The story is set." Andrew looked at me. His gaze lingered on my fake stomach. There was no warmth in his eyes, only a calculating assessment. "Good girl," he said. "You're doing the right thing, Amelia. Family comes first. Sacrifices must be made." "Speaking of sacrifices," I said, looking up from my salad. "How is Emily?" The silverware clattered against Andrew DeWalt's plate. Chris choked on his water. "Why do you ask?" Andrew demanded, his voice low. "Just curious," I said innocently. "She's carrying my son, after all. I hope she's being treated well." "She's fine," Andrew snapped. "She's in a safe house. She's being fed. She's being paid. That's more than a girl like her deserves." "A girl like her?" I tilted my head. "She was good enough for you to hire, Dad." Andrew's face turned a mottled red. She was an employee. She overstepped. She seduced my son. She created this mess. He was rewriting history in real time, blaming the girl, the classic defense of powerful men. Right, I said. It's all her fault. Exactly, Andrew grunted, taking a large gulp of scotch. But we are cleaning it up. Once that baby is born and handed over, she's gone. Back to the trailer park she crawled out of. I looked at Chris. He was nodding in agreement. Dad's right. She's just a vessel, really. Once we have the baby, we don't need her. A vessel. I looked at the two men sitting at my table. My husband, my father-in-law. To them, women were either vessels or decorations. Emily was the vessel. I was the decoration. And once the vessel was empty and the decoration was no longer useful, what then? That question kept me awake that night. The answer came the next morning, in the most mundane way possible. Chris had left his iPad on the kitchen counter. He was in the shower. Usually his device was locked, but today he had left it open on his email app. I knew I shouldn't look, but in a war, intelligence is everything. I walked over, my heart hammered against the silicone bump. The top email was from Eleanor. Subject, post-birth protocol. I tapped it. Chris, I spoke to Vance about the timeline. The birth is scheduled for February 12th. We will admit Amelia to the private wing of St. Jude's for observation 2 days prior. Regarding Amelia, once the handover is complete and the baby is registered, we need to address her stability. The stress of the pregnancy and the birth will be our narrative. I have drafted a petition for temporary guardianship of the children, both Bella and the newborn, based on postpartum psychosis. Dr. Vance agrees that given her history of difficult labor with Bella, a mental breakdown is a plausible scenario. If she becomes difficult about the property transfer or tries to leverage the situation later, we can use this. A mandatory 30-day psychiatric hold will discredit anything she says. By the time she gets out, we will have legal custody. Do not discuss this with her. Just keep her happy until February. Mom. I dropped the iPad. It clattered onto the marble countertop. The room spun. They weren't just planning to use me to legitimize the baby. They were planning to erase me. They knew I had the house. They knew I had leverage. So their plan was to declare me insane, to lock me up, to take Bella and the new baby and leave me rotting in a psychiatric ward, screaming truths that no one would believe. Postpartum psychosis. It was the perfect cover. The grieving, unstable mother who hallucinated a pregnancy or who couldn't handle the pressure. I gripped the edge of the counter. My knuckles turned white. I wasn't just fighting for my dignity anymore. I was fighting for my life. I was fighting for my freedom. If I waited until February, I was dead. If I waited until the baby was born, I lost. I had to strike now. I had to strike hard. And I had to make sure that when I spoke, the whole world was listening so that they couldn't claim I was crazy. I heard the shower stop upstairs. I quickly wiped the screen of the iPad and placed it back exactly where it was. I turned to the stove and turned on the burner. I cracked an egg into the pan. Morning, babe. Chris walked into the kitchen, towel drying his hair. Smells good. Morning, I said. I turned around and smiled. It was the best performance of my life. I was thinking, I said, my voice light and airy, about the gala tomorrow. Yeah? Chris grabbed an apple. Maybe we should make a speech, I said. Thank everyone for their support. Announce the gender officially. Make it a real moment. Chris's eyes lit up. That's a fantastic idea. Dad would love that. It shows confidence. Great, I said. I'll write something up. You're the best, Amy. He kissed my cheek. I knew you'd come around. We're going to be the power couple of Fairfax. Yes, I whispered as he walked away. We certainly are. The night before the gala, I didn't sleep. I sat in the walk-in closet surrounded by my clothes and finalized my portfolio. I had the USB drive with the videos. I had the recordings of the coercion. I had the fake medical records I had photographed from Dr. Vance's desk when he wasn't looking. And now I had screenshots of the email plotting my institutionalization. I organized them into a digital presentation. Then I drafted an email. Not to a lawyer, but to the media, the Washington Post, the Fairfax Times, and Architecture Digest. I set the email to schedule send. Tomorrow, 9:00 p.m. The gala started at 7:00 p.m. The speeches were at 8:30 p.m. By 9:00 p.m., it wouldn't matter what they said about me. The evidence would be in inboxes all over the city, but I wanted the people in the room to see it first. I packed a small bag, essentials only, passport, birth certificates, mine and Bella's, the deed to the house, the transfer papers for the Tesla. I hid the bag in the trunk of the Tesla. I went back to bed and lay next to the man who planned to lock me up. He was snoring. He was dreaming of his son, his legacy, his perfect life. I looked at the ceiling. Enjoy your last night of peace, Chris, I thought. Tomorrow the quiet house would scream. The grand ballroom of the Ritz-Carlton in Tyson's Corner was a sea of black ties and sparkling sequins. The air smelled of expensive perfume, lilies, and roasted duck. I walked in on Chris's arm, the sapphire blue dress flowing around me, the 4-pound silicone lie strapped securely to my waist. Heads up, Chris whispered, his grip on my arm tightening slightly. Here comes the chairman. Mr. Sterling, no relation to my lawyer, the chairman of the firm, approached us with a glass of champagne in hand. He was a man who valued stability above all else. Christopher, and the lovely Amelia, he beamed. His gaze dropped immediately to my midsection. And the future architect, I presume? We hope so, sir, Chris said, puffing out his chest. May I? The chairman's wife asked, reaching out a manicured hand. I flinched internally, but physically I didn't move. I let her place her hand on the cold silicone. Oh, she cooed. He's sitting quite high. Definitely a boy. Yes, I smiled, my face aching from the effort. He is very prominent. Andrew Dalton appeared and looking like the king of the castle. He clapped the chairman on the back. Good stock, eh? The Dalton line continues. Indeed, Andrew, you must be proud. Immensely, Andrew said. He looked at me, his eyes hard. Amelia has been exceptional, a true Dalton woman. I met his gaze. I do my best, Dad. Tonight is all about revealing the truth of this family, isn't it? He laughed, missing the subtext entirely. That's the spirit. We moved through the room. Handshakes, congratulations, lies. Every best wishes felt like a small cut. Every smile felt like a betrayal of my own soul. But I endured it. I was a soldier behind enemy lines, waiting for the signal to detonate. At 8:00 p.m., dinner was served. At 8:45 p.m., the lights dimmed. I excused myself from the table. Restroom, I whispered to Chris. Hurry back, he said. Speeches start in 10 minutes. I didn't go to the restroom. I went to the audio-visual booth at the back of the ballroom. The tech guy, a young man in a black polo shirt, looked up, startled. Hi, I said, flashing my most charming, harmless smile. I'm Mrs. Dalton. My husband is speaking next. Oh, hi. Can I help you? I have a little surprise for him, I said, holding up a sleek silver USB drive. A montage of family photos to play in the background during his speech. It's our anniversary soon, and I wanted to make it special. The tech guy hesitated. I usually need to check files first. Please, I touched my fake bump. I worked so hard on it, and hormones make me so emotional if things go wrong. He melted. Okay, sure, just plug it in here. I'll cue it up when he starts. Actually, I said, cue it up when I start. I'm going to say a few words after him. You got it. I plugged the drive in. I opened the file named Dalton Legacy Final.pptx. Is that the one? He asked. Yes, I said. Whatever happens, don't stop it. It has music synced to the end. No problem. I walked back to the table just as the spotlight hit the stage. Andrew went first. He stood at the podium, gripping it with both hands. Behind him, a massive screen displayed the logo of the architecture firm. Ladies and gentlemen, his voice boomed, we build structures, we build foundations. But the most important foundation is family. Applause. My son, Christopher, is following in my footsteps, and his wife, Amelia, is securing our future with another grandson. This is what matters. Legacy, honor, integrity. I sat there sipping water, watching him preach about integrity, While I visualized the video of him assaulting Emily in the bathroom, the hypocrisy was so thick I could taste it. "Come up here, son," Andrew beckoned. Chris bounded up the stairs. He looked handsome, confident. He took the mic. "Thank you, Dad. Thank you, everyone. I am a lucky man. I have a great career, a supportive father, and a wife who is the anchor of my life." He pointed at me. "Amelia, darling, come up here." This was it. I stood up. The spotlight swung to me. I walked slowly, deliberately, one hand supporting the fake weight on my stomach. The room was silent, respectful. Chris reached out his hand to help me up the stairs. "Careful, honey." I took his hand. It was warm. Mine was ice cold. I stood between them, the father and the son, the predator and the coward. "Would you like to say something?" Chris asked, offering me the mic, expecting a quick thank you. I took the microphone. I looked out at the sea of faces, hundreds of witnesses. "Yes," I said. My voice was clear, amplified by the speakers. "I have a few words." I looked at the AV booth and nodded. The screen behind us flickered. The company logo disappeared. "I want to talk about the price of legacy," I began. "We often think legacy is about what we build, but sometimes it's about what we bury." Chris frowned slightly. Andrew shifted his weight. "My husband and his father talk a lot about family," I continued. "They love family so much, they decided to expand it in unconventional ways." On the screen, the first image appeared. It wasn't a family photo. It was the email from Eleanor, blown up to 20 feet tall. Subject, post-birth protocol. Petition for guardianship. Postpartum psychosis. Psychiatric hold. Discredit anything she says. A murmur rippled through the crowd. People squinted. "What is that?" Andrew whispered harshly. "Cut the feed." "Just a moment," I said, my voice cutting over him. "This is an email from my mother-in-law outlining the plan to have me committed to a mental institution next month." "Why?" "So they can take my children." The murmur turned into a gasp. Chris lunged for me. "Amelia, stop! You're sick!" I sidestepped him. "Am I?" The slide changed. The video played. The night vision footage. Andrew Dalton, the man of integrity, cornering the 20-year-old nanny in the bathroom. The fear on her face. The force of his grip. The ballroom erupted. Screams, shouts. Andrew froze. He stared at the screen, his face draining of all color. He looked like a ghost. "Turn it off," Chris screamed at the booth. "Turn it off!" But the tech guy was frozen in shock. "That is the family Andrew Dalton built," I said into the mic. "He sleeps with the help. And when his son sleeps with the same help..." The slide changed again. The fake ultrasound next to the real paternity test proving Chris was the father of Emily's baby. They forced their wife to cover it up. I looked at Chris. He was shaking. He was destroyed. "You wanted a show, Chris," I said softly, only for him to hear. "You wanted a legacy." Then I did the final thing. I reached behind my back and unbuckled the straps. I reached under my dress, and I pulled out the silicone belly. I held it up for a second, a lifeless, flesh-colored lump of plastic. Then I dropped it. Thud. It hit the stage with a heavy, dead sound. My stomach was flat. "There is no baby," I said to the stunned, silent room. "There is only a mistress, a payoff, and a plan to lock me away." I dropped the microphone. It hit the floor with a screech of feedback that made everyone wince. For 3 seconds, nobody moved. The image of Andrew assaulting the nanny was still looping on the giant screen behind us. The silicone belly lay between Chris and Andrew like a severed head. Then the flashbulbs started, blinding rapid-fire flashes. The media was there. They were capturing every second of the Dalton empire crumbling into dust. Andrew slumped against the podium, clutching his chest. Chris stood with his mouth open, tears streaming down his face, looking at the crowd, then at me, then at his father. I didn't look back. I walked down the stairs. The crowd parted for me. Nobody touched me. They looked at me with a mixture of horror and awe. I was the woman who had just burned the temple down with everyone inside. I walked through the double doors. I walked through the lobby. I walked out into the cool night air. My Tesla was waiting. My bag was in the trunk. My phone buzzed. It was 9:01 p.m. The scheduled emails to the press had just been sent. The evidence was now global. I got into the car. I locked the doors. I didn't cry. I didn't shake. I looked in the rearview mirror. The hotel entrance was chaotic. Security was running. Ambulances were probably being called for Andrew. I put the car in drive. Route to the airport, I told the navigation system. I wasn't going to run away. I was just moving to a safe distance to watch the fire burn. Because Act 2 was over. The transaction was complete. I had paid them back in full. But there was still Act 3, the reckoning, because destroying their reputation wasn't enough. I needed to ensure they never, ever rose again. The silence in the hotel room was absolute. It was a stark, clinical silence that smelled of lemon polish and starched sheets. I sat in the armchair by the window, looking out at the lights of Washington, D.C. across the river. My phone lay on the small, round table. It had been vibrating incessantly for 3 hours. 67 missed calls from Chris, 12 missed calls from Eleanor, 40 missed calls from unknown numbers, likely press. One message from Arthur Sterling, "It has begun, don't answer anyone." I turned on the TV. The volume was low, but the headline on the local news channel screamed loud enough. Gallagate, Dalton dynasty collapses in shocking expose. They were playing the footage. Not the explicit parts, those were blurred, but the moment I dropped the silicone belly on the stage, the moment the microphone hit the floor, the look of sheer terror on Andrew Dalton's face. The news anchor, a woman with a serious expression, was speaking rapidly. Allegations of sexual misconduct, coercion, and fraud. Andrew Dalton, a titan of Virginia architecture, was rushed to Fairfax General Hospital shortly after the event, reportedly suffering from chest pains. His son, Christopher Dalton, has not been seen since leaving the venue. I took a sip of sparkling water. Andrew had a heart attack. Or a panic attack. It didn't matter. The walls were breached. I picked up my phone and blocked Chris's number. I blocked Eleanor's. Then I dialed Sterling. "Mrs. Dalton?" His voice was calm, almost cheerful. "Or should I say the most famous woman in Virginia right now?" "What is the situation, Arthur?" I asked. "Chaos," Sterling replied. "Beautiful, unmitigated chaos. The police have seized the hard drive you gave the tech guy. They are opening an investigation into Andrew for sexual assault. The email about your psychosis plot is circulating online. People are calling it the gaslight of the century." "And Eleanor?" "She is the only one still standing," Sterling warned, "and she is fighting back. She just released a statement through the firm's PR crisis team." "Read it to me." Sterling cleared his throat. The video footage shown at the gala was a deep-fake fabrication created by a mentally unstable woman suffering from severe postpartum psychosis. The Dalton family asked for privacy as we seek help for Amelia Dalton during her breakdown. I laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. "She's sticking to the script," I said. "Even after I exposed the email planning that exact script." "She has no choice," Sterling said. "If she admits the footage is real, her husband goes to prison and she loses everything. She has to double down on your insanity. She's going to try to freeze your assets tomorrow morning, claiming you were not of sound mind when you signed the property transfer." "Can she do that?" "She can try. It will tie things up in court for months. Unless..." "Unless what?" "Unless we have a witness," Sterling said. "The video is powerful, Amelia. But in court, a good lawyer can argue it's doctored, especially with AI technology these days. But a living, breathing witness? That is undeniable." "You mean Emily," I said. "Exactly. We need the girl. We need her to stand up and say, 'Yes, that happened to me. Yes, that is my baby.' If we get her, Eleanor is checkmated." "I know where she is," I said. "Be careful, Amelia. Eleanor knows where she is too. And now that the secret is out, Emily is a liability to them, a loose end." A chill went down my spine. Eleanor Dalton was a woman who viewed people as assets or liabilities. When an asset became a liability, you liquidated it. "I'll get to her first," I said. I hung up. I stood up and changed out of the sapphire dress. I put on jeans, a dark hoodie, and sneakers. I pulled my hair back. I wasn't the grieving wife anymore. I was the hunter. According to the hacked files, Emily was being kept at a safe house paid for by a shell company linked to the Dalton firm. The address was in a rundown area near the airport, a place where transient workers and people who didn't want to be found lived. The Blue Heron Motel, room 14. I drove the Tesla. It was risky, the car was distinctive, but I needed speed. It was raining again. The weather seemed to be mourning the Dalton family, so you can, or perhaps washing away their sins. I pulled into the motel parking lot. It was dark, illuminated only by a flickering neon sign. I saw a black SUV parked near room 14. The engine was running. My heart skipped a beat. I parked 2 rows away, in the shadows. I watched. 2 men got out of the SUV. They were large, wearing dark suits that looked out of place in this dump. They weren't police. They looked like private security. Or fixers. They knocked on the door of room 14. I couldn't hear what they were saying, but the body language was aggressive. The door opened a crack. I saw a slice of Emily's face. She looked terrified. One of the men pushed the door open and stepped inside. The other stood guard outside. I had to act. I didn't have a weapon, but I had the car, and I had the element of surprise. I pulled out my phone and dialed 911. Emergency, I whispered. Blue Heron Motel, room 14. 2 men are breaking in. A pregnant woman is screaming. They have guns. I lied about the guns. I needed the police there fast. Police are on the way, ma'am. Stay on the line. I hung up. I revved the engine. The Tesla was silent, but the tires screeched as I peeled out of the parking spot. I drove straight toward the SUV, stopping just inches from its bumper, blocking it in. I turned on the high beams, flooding the area with blinding light. The guard outside room 14 shielded his eyes, reaching into his jacket. I honked the horn. A long, continuous blast. Doors from other rooms started to open. People stepped out, curious and annoyed. Bruh! I screamed out the window. Fire. Chaos is a great distractor. The man inside the room ran out, looking around wildly. Let's go, he shouted to his partner. Too many eyes. They jumped into the SUV, realized I was blocking them, cursed, and reversed over the curb to escape across the grass. They sped away just as sirens wailed in the distance. I jumped out of the car and ran to room 14. The door was unlocked. I pushed it open. Emily was huddled in the corner of the bed, clutching a pillow. She was shaking so hard the bed frame rattled. Her face was pale, tear-streaked. When she saw me, she screamed, "Don't hurt me! Please, they said you were crazy. They said you would kill the baby." I stood in the doorway, breathing hard. "Get up," I said coldly. "What?" She blinked, confused. "The police are coming. If they find you here, Eleanor will send her lawyers to bail you out. And then she will hide you where no one will ever find you. Those men weren't here to bring you flowers, Emily. They were here to silence you." She looked at the open door, then at me. The reality of her situation was sinking in. She was a pawn in a game she didn't understand. "Why should I trust you?" she sobbed. "You hate me. I slept with your husband." "I don't hate you," I said. "I despise what you did, but I don't hate you. You are irrelevant to me, Emily. You are just a tool. But right now, I am the only person in the world who needs you alive and talking." I extended my hand. "Come with me. We destroy them together. Or stay here and wait for them to come back to finish the job." Sirens were getting louder. Blue and red lights flashed against the motel walls. Emily looked at her swollen belly. She looked at my hand. She stood up. We sat in a 24-hour diner 10 miles away. It was 3:00 a.m. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead. Emily drank a milkshake with trembling hands. She looked so young. Too young to be in the middle of this nightmare. "What do you want me to do?" she asked, her voice small. "I have a lawyer," I said, "Arthur Sterling. You are going to feed on him in the morning. You are going to give a sworn deposition." "About what?" "Everything," I said. "Chris, the money Eleanor paid you, and Andrew." She flinched at Andrew's name. She put the milkshake down. He's a monster," she whispered. "I didn't want to. With Chris, I thought it was love. He told me you were cold. He told me you didn't understand him. I was stupid. But Andrew just took." "I know," I said. "I saw the video." She looked up, shame burning in her cheeks. "You saw it?" Everyone saw it, I said brutally. I played it at the gala. She covered her face with her hands. Oh God, my parents, everyone. Your shame is their weapon, I said, leaning across the table. As long as you hide, they win. Eleanor is already spinning the story. She's saying the video is fake. She's saying I'm crazy. If you don't speak up, they will paint you as a whore and me as a lunatic, and they will walk away clean. I grabbed her wrist, pulling her hands away from her face. Look at me. You are carrying a Dalton heir. That baby makes you dangerous to them. But if you testify, if you help me put Andrew in jail and strip Eleanor of her power, I will make sure you are safe. I will give you enough money to start over. Far away from here. Why? She asked. Why would you help me? Because it is, I said. The enemy of my enemy is my ammunition. She stared at me for a long moment. Then she nodded. Okay, she said. I'll do it. The next morning, the storm broke. We walked into Sterling's office at 9:00 a.m. Oh, and Emily looked ragged but determined. By 11 o'clock a.m., her deposition was recorded. By 12 o'clock p.m., Sterling had filed it with the district attorney and released a snippet to the press with Emily's consent. The snippet was simple. Just Emily, looking directly at the camera, saying, "My name is Emily. I was the nanny for the Dalton family. The video is real. Andrew Dalton assaulted me, and Eleanor Dalton paid me to hide it." The effect was nuclear. Eleanor's narrative of postpartum psychosis evaporated instantly. You can call one woman crazy. You can't call two women crazy when their stories match perfectly and there is video evidence. At 1:00 p.m., my phone rang. It wasn't a blocked number. It was the hospital. "Mrs. Dalton?" a nurse asked. "Yes. I'm calling regarding your husband, Christopher Dalton. He was admitted an hour ago." I frowned. Admitted? Is he with his father? "No, ma'am. He was brought in by ambulance, overdose, sleeping pills and alcohol. He's stable, but he's asking for you." I felt nothing. No pity, no sadness, just a dull sense of inevitability. Chris was a man who had never faced a consequence in his life. When the wave finally hit him, he drowned. "I'll be there," I said. I hung up. Sterling looked at me. "You don't have to go." "I know," I said, "but I want to. I want to see the wreckage." I turned to Emily. "Stay here. Don't open the door for anyone but Arthur." I walked out into the rain. The city was buzzing with the scandal. The Dalton name, once gold, was now mud. I drove to the hospital, room 304. Chris was lying in the bed, hooked up to an IV. He looked gray. His eyes were hollow, surrounded by dark circles. When I walked in, he turned his head. Tears immediately welled up in his eyes. "Amelia," he croaked. I stood at the foot of the bed. I didn't get closer. "Why?" he whispered. "Why did you have to ruin everything? We could have been happy. I gave you the house. I gave you everything." "You gave me a cage," I said, "and you tried to lock me in it with a lie." "I loved you," he sobbed. I made a mistake. And then Mom, she took over. I couldn't stop her." "That is your epitaph, Chris," I said. "He couldn't stop Mommy." He closed his eyes. "Dad is going to jail. The firm is ruined. Mom is screaming at lawyers. I have nothing." "You have a son," I said, "with Emily." He flinched. "I don't want him. I never wanted him. It was just a fix." "That baby is a human being," I said, disgusted. "Not a fix. You don't deserve him, and you don't deserve me." I reached into my bag and pulled out a folder. "What is that?" he asked. "Divorce papers," I said, "and a restraining order. I'm taking Bella. You are unfit. Your suicide attempt today just proved it to the court. You are unstable." I threw the folder onto his chest. "Sign them now and I won't press charges against you for conspiracy to commit fraud. Fight me and I will make sure you share a cell with your father." He looked at the papers. His hands shook as he reached for the pen on the bedside table. He was broken. He had no fight left. The entitlement had been stripped away, leaving only a frightened little boy. He signed. "Goodbye, Chris," I said. I turned to leave. "Amelia," he called out, his voice cracking. "What will you do?" I stopped at the door. "I'm going to live," I said, quietly. I walked out. One down, two to go. Andrew was facing prison. Chris was broken. That left Eleanor. The queen was cornered, but she was still on the board, and I knew she wouldn't sign her surrender in a hospital bed. She would wait for me in the ruins of her empire. It was time for the final audience, CT3, the final reckoning. Part 2, the rain had stopped by the time I pulled into the driveway of the house. My house. The windows were dark except for a single light in the living room. I knew she would be there. Eleanor Dalton was not the type of woman to hide in a bunker. She was the captain who would stand on the bridge of the sinking ship, screaming orders until the water filled her lungs. I walked to the front door. I didn't need a key. The lock was biometric, and I had already removed Chris's fingerprints from the system remotely. I opened the door. The house smelled of cold air and something burning, like old paper. Eleanor was sitting in the same armchair where she had forced me to wear the prosthetic belly. The fireplace was lit, consuming a pile of documents. She looked different. The impeccable armor of hairspray and makeup was cracked. Her hair was loose, gray strands escaping the pins. Her eyes were red. She looked old. Not dignified old, but withered. "You changed the locks," she said, not looking away from the fire. "It's my house," I replied, closing the door behind me. "I can do what I want." She threw another file into the flames. "I'm burning the trust fund papers. The ones for Bella. If I go down, I'm taking every penny with me. You won't see a dime of the family fortune." I walked over and stood near the fire. The heat was intense. "I don't want your fortune, Eleanor. I have the house, I have the car, and I have the settlement money you wired me last week. That's enough for me." She finally looked up. Her eyes were full of venom. "You ungrateful little stray. We took you in. We gave you a life most women only dream of. And this is how you repay us? By destroying my husband? By driving my son to suicide?" "Andrew destroyed himself when he assaulted a young girl," I said calmly. "Chris destroyed himself when he decided to be a coward instead of a man. And you destroyed them both by thinking you could control everything." Eleanor stood up. She was shaking with rage. "I built this family. I managed the firm while Andrew played the artist. I cleaned up Chris's messes. I did what was necessary to survive." "And that's why you're alone, Bob," I said. "I am not alone," she screamed. "I am Eleanor Dalton. The board will stand by me. The firm will survive this. We have weathered scandals before." I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. "Actually," I said, "I just got off the phone with Arthur Sterling. Not the lawyer, the chairman. He saw the news. He saw Emily's deposition." Eleanor froze. "The board held an emergency meeting an hour ago," I continued. "They voted unanimously to remove Andrew as a partner. They are severing all us with the Dalton family name to save the company stock. You are out, Eleanor. You have no firm. You have no power." She stared at me, her mouth opening and closing. No sound coming out. The one thing she valued more than life itself, her status, was gone. "No," she whispered. "That's impossible." "Check your email," I said. She scrambled for her handbag, pulling out her phone. She tapped the screen with frantic fingers. I watched her face as she read the notification. I watched the light die in her eyes. She slumped back into the chair, the phone slipping from her hand. She looked at the fire. She looked at the ashes of the documents she had burned. Ashes. That was all that was left of her legacy. Wait, she asked, her voice broken. "We could have just paid her off. We could have been a family." "We were never a family, Eleanor," I said. "We were a business, and I just closed the account." I walked to the door. "Get out," I said. "What?" "Get out of my house, now, or I call the police and have you arrested for trespassing. You have nowhere to go, but you can't stay here." She looked at me with hatred, but also with fear. She realized I wasn't bluffing. Slowly, painfully, she stood up. She gathered her coat. She picked up her handbag. She walked past me. She didn't look at me. She walked out into the cold night, a queen without a kingdom, stepping into the darkness she had created. I closed the door. I locked it. The house was finally quiet. Epilogue, 6 months later. The airport terminal was busy, people rushing, hugging, saying hello and goodbye. I sat at the gate, Bella playing with a toy plane on the floor next to me. I looked at the newspaper on the seat next to me. Architect Andrew Dalton sentenced to 8 years. The trial had been swift. The evidence was overwhelming. Eleanor hadn't even shown up to the sentencing. Rumors said she had moved to a small condo in Florida, living off a meager pension, shunned by her former social circle. Chris was in a rehab facility in Arizona. He sent letters sometimes. I never opened them. I simply marked them returned to sender. He needed to find his own redemption. I was not his keeper anymore. And Emily, I looked across the terminal. She was sitting a few gates away, rocking a stroller. A baby boy sleeping soundly inside. I had given her half of the settlement money, $250,000. It was enough to start over in a new state, go back to school, and raise the child away from the toxic shadow of the Daltons. She saw me looking. She offered a small, shy smile. She mouthed the words, "Thank you." I nodded. We wouldn't keep in touch. We weren't friends. We were just two survivors who had helped each other escape a sinking ship. Flight 402 to London is now boarding, the announcer's voice echoed. I picked up Bella. Ready for an adventure? I asked her. She giggled. Plane! I handed my boarding pass to the attendant. One way? She asked. Yes, I smiled. One way. I walked down the jet bridge. I didn't look back at Virginia. I didn't look back at the pain, the betrayal, or the victory. I had sold the house. I had sold the Tesla. I had liquidated every asset connected to the name Dalton. I was Amelia again. Just Amelia. As the plane took off, climbing above the clouds, I looked down at the shrinking city. From up here, the grand estates looked like dollhouses. The drama, the power struggles, the legacy, it all looked so small. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. For the first time in 3 years, the silence wasn't heavy. It wasn't waiting for a shoe to drop. It was just peace.